Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name's Sterling. I'm your host. So, IPSOS, the marketing and research company, ran a poll of about 1,000 Canadians, and they were asking them questions around: do you take pride in being a Canadian? Things like, do you tell other people that are not Canadian how wonderful Canada is? And one of the big questions that they asked them was, do you think Canada is broken? And we all remember when Pierre Poilievre said that Canada is broken, and he still says it a lot, and how the far left, the Liberal and the NDP went crazy and tried to paint the picture that he was essentially Stalin and Mussolini and all of them wrapped up into one. Meanwhile, it turns out that Canadians, for the most part, agree with him. And I don't mean a little bit. This is a huge number of respondents. And so, like I say, it's across all shapes and sizes. So before we get into it, I would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all your socials.
A new survey has found a decline in Canadian pride. More than a third of Canadians say they feel less proud to be Canadian than they did 5 years ago. Canadians were also asked if they agree with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre that, quote, Canada is broken. 70% of them say they strongly or somewhat agree. Agreement is higher among younger Canadians.
And how Canadians are feeling about our country, especially younger Canadians, where 78% describe Canada as broken. People are really feeling it difficult to get by these days. They're having a very hard time getting by. And the promise of Canada in terms of our prosperity and security, at least what we thought we were told about the country we're living in, is feeling further and further away for Canadians, in which our political leaders have not really celebrated Canada, not really told us why we should be proud of our Canadian heritage. We get a lot of apologies. We get a lot of other things coming out of our political leaders, but not a lot of pride. And I think both things are coming together to cause a problem.
So I agree with him, and I'll get into that in a second. But first, I'd like you to take a look at the 5 questions that were asked. And you can see them there. Feel proud to be Canadian. 35% said less likely. 32% said they were less likely to attend a Canada Day festival. 28% said they were less likely to display a Canadian flag. 27% said they were less likely to speak positively about Canada to those not from Canada. And 20% they were less likely to learn more about Indigenous history. Now, the last one, I can understand that might somehow be not relevant, right? And that's part of the identity crisis that this country has, that the government keeps fanning. And they open up every speech by trying to tell you that they're on some land. They don't do that in Turkey. They tell you, they're like, yeah, our ancestors were from 10,000 miles away and we rode horses over here. We took control of all of it. They don't have any problem with that. You don't hear them saying that in any of the Caribbean islands. They don't have any problem. So I think that it's time that we sort of started to re-examine what it means to be a Canadian, what it means to have identity, and how some things need to be let go of. What I like is this one, right? Younger Canadians more likely to feel Canada is broken, 70% strongly and somewhat agree. When asked if they agree or disagree with Pierre Poilievre that Canada is broken, 70% say they agree, with 32% saying they strongly agree. So almost half of those 70%, right? Which is, I think it's like 1,018 people were asked. So 70% of that, 700 people out of 1,000. I mean, that's basically, that's a huge number. It's just a staggering amount of people. Agreement is higher among younger Canadians, with 78% between 18 and 34 agreeing that Canada is broken, and that, of course, they're unhappy with. What I like is the last stat, right? That Liberal voters, 66% agreed that Canada is broken. So 2 out of every 3, even the Liberals, they can't hide no more from the fact that Canadians are unhappy with the way that this country is being governed. The Canadians are unhappy with the way that this country is being run. The idea that you can take all of the people that are 18 to 34 and make them miserable in their own country. I mean, imagine in your mind that your grandparents left the country that you were in, and they came to this country, and you allowed the government to turn this country into the basic economic promise of the country that you ran away from. Now, that's just one part of it. There's another part of the idea that we have to somehow feel this pride that we're from somewhere else. I know a guy, and he's my age, who his mother was born in Uganda, right? Though when you look at him, he's Indian, right? He's from India, not First Nation. And his mother was born in Uganda, and his mother's mother and father were born in Uganda because in the 50s, there was a large influx of Africans into three or four African nations. And over the time and over the course of it, they began to have all of the commerce. They were the ones that were, controlled, owned all the stores and all of that stuff. And then there was a revival of African identity, and the governments at the time, in an effort to get people to like them, threw all of the middle class out, thinking that somehow that money would just rub off magically onto the people that were from that country. And it caused such economic destruction that some of those countries are still not recovered. The point that I'm making is not about African countries, though. The point that I'm trying to get you to understand is this guy has kids in Canada, and I've talked to him and I've heard him say things like, "We'll have to tell people that are from India that I don't eat like they do back home." And when he says back home, and he's referring, I'm like, "What do you mean? Are you talking about Uganda back home? Because you certainly are 4 or 5 generations removed from India. Why would you consider that to be your home?" People from Western Europe and from Eastern Europe don't come to Canada 4 generations later. You don't have people running up and down Saskatchewan saying, "Oh, Ukraine is back home." You don't have people that came from China who, were put in the railways back in the late 1800s telling themselves that they got to go back home. But some people in this country want to believe that it's better to be from somewhere else because the leadership in this country tells you that being from here is bad, is wrong. It's okay if you want to be a nationalist and you're French from Quebec. Oh, you can take pride in that for some reason in the mind of our House of Commons representatives. And you can take pride in the fact if you're a First Nation. But if you're from Brampton, nope, you're not allowed to take pride in being from Canada. If you're from Saskatchewan, forget about it. You're not allowed to take pride in being from Canada, according to all of the people in our House of Commons. And that's part of the issue, that we have an identity that is being destroyed and floundered by our federal government in an effort for them to divide us and to get votes just so they can seek power. But one of the reasons that I started this channel is because I want Canadians to have an identity. I mean, we don't all have to cheer for the same hockey team, but we do have to understand that in Canada, we play a lot of hockey and we play it rough. We go in elbows up, and we spend time in the elements, and we talk about these things. Now you look, you get a whole generation of 18 to 34-year-olds who not only are being told that if for some reason it's a bad idea if you want to take pride in the country that you're from, even though you're 3-4 generations removed from where your great-great-grandparents ran away from. Don't forget that unless you're from First Nations, the 90% of the people that came to Canada came here because wherever their ancestor was from wasn't treating them right, wasn't doing good by them, and they ran to have a better opportunity. And now the government has allowed permitted this government to turn this country into own nothing and be happy. Are you happy? Are you happy paying 75% of your income to your rent so that you will not only will you not own anything, but you can't even feed yourself in what you do rent? And that's not the promise of a great Canada. That's not even a promise nobody wants that. That's one of the biggest reasons that we come to this country, is so that people can own their own things and they don't have to be indentured to the people who have enshrined their money in centuries old money in every country. And don't go telling yourself that it's a Western European phenomenon, because it certainly is not. But in many of the countries that we're referring to, the land has been owned for generations by the same landlord. And the people that lived there said, I want something better. So they came to Canada, only to turn around and have Canada say, well, you will own nothing and be happy, and don't cut down a tree. You can't drive a car. You got to take snowshoes to go get your groceries. And these young people are paying rent that would buy 3 houses a month in other places. So obviously they're unhappy. And obviously they're not telling themselves that they can tell people to take pride in the country that they're from. They're not going to tell people, yeah, come to Canada where you can't afford to rent, your cell phone's through the roof, and you can't get a good paying job. I don't understand why it hasn't come out sooner. But we can see that the federal government is delusional in its approach to the way Canadians are actually feeling. And this promise of making high density apartment buildings is not cutting it. It's not cutting the mustard. Canadians want to work hard. They want their own piece of property. They want to have their own thing. They want generational wealth. They want to know that if they own an apartment building, they can sell it, or if they own a company as a welder, they can sell it and not have to pay a capital tax for it. They want to feel safe. They want to be Canadian. They want to be happy. They want to laugh. They want to be polite. And they don't want interference from their government turning their lives into a living nightmare. Obviously. Or they wouldn't have said that they feel Canada is broken. They would have said, no, everything is wonderful. Everything is great. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I'll talk to you next time.